Good morning. We're going to start this morning by talking about a free online game after police and a coroner have warned about the risks of it to children. It's called Doki Doki Literature Club.
Honestly, I don't know why people even bother at this point. No matter how many times this is debunked, no matter how many times this subject comes up, there's always people who will use whatever means possible to slander video games or use it as a scapegoat in some capacity. So, let's just go against everything I just said and talk about it some more, shall we? Enter the BBC, or for those who don't spend time wasting on a fossil, that's the British broadcast company, and honestly, if you don't know about them, I don't blame you. They're part of the old school media. So recently, they did a story on Doki Doki Literature Club, where they tried to tie the death of a kid to the game. Well, the father of it does, but they're reporting on it, and they keep on pushing it, so make that as you will.
An inquest will be held into the death of a 15-year-old called Ben Wormsley from Bury, whose father said the game dragged his son in. And a pre-inquest review is due to take place at 10 o'clock this morning in that case.
Yeah! In fact, there's a lot of weird things said in this segment. The game dragged his son in? What? Let's play some Doki Doki Literature Club!
Bad idea.
Dull surprise! Next!
Greater Manchester Police have said we believe this game is a risk to children and young people, especially those that are emotionally vulnerable and anyone with existing mental health concerns.
Oh, so now you're a detective, eh, Captain Emo?
How long did it take the police to figure that out? The game outright warns you about the content at the beginning. You know, it's funny because right after this portion, they show the disclaimer that literally says you shouldn't play the game if you're easily disturbed, at least in the trailer. Can you really blame the game if people ignore the warning or aren't suitable for it? It'd be like blaming a bottle of bleach that warns of the chemical properties and how dangerous it is, and then some genius decides to drink it regardless of that. There's a clear warning label on the game, and it's not the game's fault that you ignored it. Also, can we take a moment to talk about the text that's aligned on the screen? They have "the game is" on the screen twice. Is this really the editing prowess of a national news corporation?
Yes.
The coroner has warned this is a psychological horror game with suicide as a main feature. And notes too, it does warn it's not suitable for children. However, the graphics, etc., are clearly aimed at young people.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
Because of the anime styling? Clearly the BBC has never seen anime before. Because anything that has a semblance to a cartoon or the anime art style is clearly for little kids. Let's just ignore the genre and the fact that it's modeled after a dating sim. This series of games that typically aren't for a younger demographic, art style does not automatically dictate the content or who it's aimed towards. If we want to go by cartoon standards, Aqua Teen Hunger Force is a kid's show with its art style.
Sure glad that wasn't blood. I would have been offended out of my ass.
Me too, you mother suck.
Acceptable.
Despite all the over-top themes and adult content in it. And remember, I'm only talking about the art style here. Yes, kids are going to want to watch it, but that doesn't mean it's targeted towards kids, especially when the developer says otherwise. Also, no, it's not clearly aimed at kids, that's just your opinion that it is.
We've contacted the game's creators, Team Salvato, but so far we haven't heard back. Here's the trailer for the game with that warning right at the start.
Congratulations on debunking your own argument! We're going to be skipping the trailer, but I think it's appropriate that we show the actual warning here. Notice that it says there's really disturbing content in here. That should be a clue for parents to pick up on. There's also the Steam page warning you and asking you to put your birthday in order to view the game. And even then, Steam has parental controls that will allow you to filter out certain tags. There are things that parents could have easily done to prevent this sort of thing from happening. However, in the rest of this segment, there are a few things we need to point out, and this won't be as stringent as my other commentaries because throughout the segment, the guests here actually counter blaming the game since it falls into the parents to make sure their kids aren't accessing things like Doki Doki Literature Club. We've got Laura Kate Dale, Helen Ground, and Laura Fraser, who at some point do actually defend the game in some capacity.
Well, firstly, it is a dating game. These aren't kids' games. Some people kind of get the idea that this kind of anime style is kiddie because it looks cartoony, but in Japan, anime can be for anyone, and it is over in the US and in the UK. And this type of game isn't a type of game for children.
Acceptable.
But then we kind of get points like this.
But it's also important to avoid any confusion around focusing on one particular game because there will be others. So we don't want to give the message to parents, firstly to really alarm parents, because there are lots of good things online too, but not to give the message to parents that if your child isn't playing this particular game, then there's no cause for concern.
Yeah.
You know, there are others.
What?
Laura, you're nodding your head in agreement.
Definitely. There are certain parts of what have been said about this particular game that do lead me to suspect that it may not have been the only game involved in this particular tragic event. Without knowing specifically...
We'll have to wait for the inquest, so we
We'd
can't
have to
speculate.
obviously wait for the inquest, but there were statements made about this game by the father that are not things that are featured in this game, which would suggest that perhaps there were other games being engaged with that aren't the focus of this inquest. So, obviously,
Or another possibility is that the father is just using the game as a scapegoat. We've seen several times that people will use the media as scapegoats whenever something bad happens to their kids, in order to cover up any bad parenting.
2 little girls stabbing their friend in the name of Slender Man. What the hell? Okay, first of all, Slender Man doesn't stab people. That doesn't even have anything to do with his lore. Second of all, way to go, media. Blame the video games, like you always do.
I remember about a decade ago that the anime Naruto was blamed for the suffocation of a kid who put his head in the sand because there was a character named Gaara who could manipulate the sand. Yeah, I'm not kidding!
On Saturday, Cody was playing with friends in the backyard sandbox at a neighbor's house. It's believed the children were mimicking this cartoon called Naruto Sand Ninjas when Cody was buried headfirst in the sand.
Again, the game or media isn't at fault, especially since apparently the father described things attributed to the game that aren't actually in said game.
there are certain parts of what have been said about this particular game that do lead me to suspect that it may not have been the only game involved in this particular tragic event.
That should be a red flag for anyone.
This is one game perhaps to look at and say, should your child be playing this? But also be aware of what else they're playing, because there might be other potential risk factors available.
Well, I do agree that the parents need to watch what their kids are doing. Again, that's assuming that it's the fault of the game that caused this.
I think there is definitely a concern to be made for, parents not paying attention to what their children are engaging with just because there's an age box that was ticked first.
But I'm being realistic as a parent.
Yeah.
You know, I might see it says 13, tick that box. I'd see the warning at the beginning, and then I would think, okay, it's fine for my teenager.
I'm not saying that as a criticism of parents.
Yeah.
I would actually say that it is, because as a parent, it's up to you to make sure you know what your kids are getting into. And if you have some concerns about this game, you know what you can do? You can look up the game.
Brilliant! Brilliant!
Just taking a few moments to look up the game on Steam will actually take you to an age check screen that has the tags psychological horror, gore, violent, sexual content, and horror. Those are tags being used to describe the game, and you can actually use Steam to filter out games that have certain tags. Yes, kids can access this game easily, but as parents, it's up to them to monitor their kids' activities on the internet. And as I said before, you need to enter your birthday before playing the game, and you can prevent your kids from even viewing the game. This whole thing is a mess. Look, I do feel bad that a kid ended his life, but it's not the game's fault. It's up to the parents to realize these sorts of things are happening in their kids' lives. The parents need to get involved with them. They need to monitor what they're doing on the internet. And if there is content that you don't want your kids to view, then it's up to you as parents to, 1, talk to them about it, or 2. Find ways to prevent them from actually accessing that kind of content. Steam's parental controls, looking into the game itself, or, having eyeballs. But what do you guys think? I'm hoping to get a conversation going here, so let me know what you guys think. That is what the comment section is for. I'm Skullcom, and remember to examine your fandom.